Hello and welcome back to the Horse Race Politics podcast. This is part 2 of our discussion with the majestic Michael Bossetta. I was thinking through the last week's episode that we're kind of the the artwork that depicts the evolution of man, going from into a caveman into a grown man. I kind of think if you put our facial hair in a line, Matt would be like this fish that's just learned to climb out of the ocean. I'm the guy hobbling around, and then Michael's this like the finished deal. It's
1 foot in the grave.
Yeah. So last week we talked quite a lot about social media, current events through the lens of social media. Today we're going to have a teeny bit more of a chat rooted in some kind of academic substance, if you will. That is the one advantage of a podcast of academics, is that occasionally they write things and that get published. So I think one of the, well, actually, just to recap, as a good starting point, we did get you to do a little brief intro of your kind of research interests, but I guess, can you just repeat your kind of research specialties? What is your authority on this subject, let's say?
Right. So I do research on social media, usually around elections. But I think for what we'll talk about today, one of my specialties is looking at kind of politics across platforms on social media, trying to figure out how all these different platforms are kind of affecting the overall landscape of politics.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna kick off. I'm going to indulge in a little quotation from a paper that you had published very recently, a very good paper, I might add, where you said, so there's a couple of sentences and then I'll hit you with the question. Well, it may not have been you, it might be one of your co-authors, but we'll go from there.
Good chance for deflection.
Yeah, there's a typo on this page. I think you need to fix it. The quote is, right-wing users are more likely to post on all social media platforms, which we explain in terms of discontent with mainstream media and a preference, for platforms enabling closed, private discussions such as WhatsApp and Snapchat. Furthermore, we find that right-wing users are more likely to post on Reddit compared to left-wing or moderate users, which we explain in terms of a greater comfort posting in anonymous spaces with temporary connections. So my question was quite simply, could you kind of expand on that a little bit more and maybe unpack why there might be this tendency for right-wing individuals to kind of lean more into these shadier, anonymous, conversation gets deleted after it's happened kind of spaces?
Right. So let's begin with the usual caveats
Yes.
of this is based on survey data. So a survey taken at one point in time across 4 different countries. So we do know from research that people have issues with recalling or remembering how often they engage in certain activities. So we asked them, how often do you write something political on these different social media? People also have challenges reporting their own political leanings. So those are all the kind of caveats of survey research. But what our survey sort of found was that, yes, people who identify as right wing tend to be more active in posting in these sort of what we could call more niche platforms. So they don't have the we're not talking about the big Facebook and the big Instagram, but more like Reddit and WhatsApp and these types of groups. And I think one way we can interpret this is that there tends to be a left-wing bias in the mainstream press. It can be more extreme, or most of the time it's more kind of moderate left. Like there is this kind of left-wing framing in how facts are arranged, which is something we talked about last episode. And so what we try to, one explanation for why we might have these survey results is that right-wing users feel that their views aren't represented in the mainstream media or the mainstream media news that is shared on like more mainstream social platforms. So they look to these more alternative outlets to discuss their views because they feel that they can't do it in more mainstream fora.
Awesome.
And what is the role of anonymity here? So again, I think we had like Plato's allegory of the cave last week, but there's another ancient Greek allegory about a person gets this power of invisibility, and how invisibility in a way kind of reveals their worst
Who they are.
inclinations, or their true persona, really. So why is anonymity sort of significant in this sort of ideological, because I can see sort of, okay, I have a chance to express an opinion, but why does it not have to attach to you as a person?
Yeah, I mean, because just like invisibility, there's this detachment from accountability, right? Like you operate under this handle at whatever. Um, and also all the people you're interacting with become decontextualized. Like if you take Reddit, for example, your avatar is this little like, space alien thing, right? And you don't identify, like if you're looking at someone face to face, you're not going to interact with them the same way as if you just see, a handle like Nike sneaker 97. I mean, like
Other sneakers are available, we must say.
So it really is just like that decontextualization where and that can lead to these toxic conversations, this incivility. But if you put those same group of people in a room, I doubt you'd have the same level of nastiness. It doesn't have to be nasty either. There's lots of anonymous groups that are, support groups for cancer, mental illness, these types of things. But we do tend to see, not always, but there's kind of a tendency where when the discussion is anonymous, then that's when people are more likely to have these kind of personal insults.
So one of the things I wanted to ask that I think would actually be quite helpful for the general audience, because I'm quite keen to make this discussion more of like a like heed Michael's warnings of what could be going down on all these different platforms. I think generally I think you say in the paper that people on average use something crazy like 10 different social media platforms. But I don't think people, the average Joe, does that out of anything other than like either the content or the people that they can talk to on those platforms. Like I'm gonna use YouTube because I want to see these certain creators on YouTube, or I use WhatsApp because I want to talk to my family or friends. And really the decision doesn't really go any further than that for many people, and I'm oversimplifying, of course. But I guess the question was, typically in your research on social media, what are you seeing as kind of the core functions of different platforms? Are there certain spaces where if somebody said to you, I like talking about this, or I like doing this, you'd kind of be able to say, okay, you're probably using this one platform. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think people do self-select into platforms. There's also kind of, I would say, the demographics of the user base, meaning like who are the people who are generally on the platform. So I think this has changed a bit during COVID because everyone was online, but Reddit was typically like white, middle class, and so you would see a lot of discussions around like stocks, right?
Yeah.
Which led to this whole thing with GameStop and meme stocks and all
Meme
that.
stocks, yeah.
So like if you were a white middle class dude, you would go to Reddit because that's where people were discussing like topics that white middle class dudes, typically in the US or UK, talk about. But that context can also be dependent on your real life. So there's a lot of interesting research coming out of the UK about WhatsApp, where you may not be a WhatsApp user, but your child goes to school with other parents who use WhatsApp. So then you sign up to the platform to keep it aware of like what's going on with the school. So there's all these contextual factors that lead to why people use different platforms. But some platforms, like I just gave the example of Reddit, Twitter in the old days was much more about like keeping up with individual journalists and breaking news. So if you're very news interested, you would use that platform. But then there's also like these grab bag platforms like TikTok, Instagram, where you can go into the platform and then just kind of create your own niche of following accounts that produce content that you're interested in.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about like why it is the case that how to say this, like certain do you think certain formats, like so different platforms, like you said, some are multi-format, kind of like Swiss Army knife, but do you think short video enables a certain type of political messaging, or like, and maybe, I don't know, Facebook enables slightly different, simply because of the like technological media configuration that they let you actually push out as a creator.
Right. So if you think a little bit before short form video, and platforms still have this, they have different lengths of video that you can post. Like Instagram used to be 2 minutes, whereas I think YouTube, was 45 or unlimitless, or you could live stream there. So I think when you compress into short form video, which is, I don't know what the limit is on TikTok these days. But typically you're looking at like maybe like 30 seconds is what you
Yeah.
can hold someone's attention for. And like, I think we talked a little bit about Charlie Kirk last episode. I know you've done an episode on this already, but like he would have these 2 or 3 hour long debates with college students, and then he'd take the most controversial part and chop it into a minute.
Talk it down, yeah.
So if you only have people's attention for a little bit of time, it incentivizes political content to be more controversial, more negative, rather than, hearing a very respectful exchange between Charlie Kirk and a listener. Like no one wants that when they're swiping through so much other clickbaity stuff.
Yeah, and so that's a bit troubling, where like the biggest single trend in like the media structure favors essentially like a
rage bait, basically.
Polarizing.
People getting angry.
Yeah, and it, I think what I've also seen enabled in TikTok is kind of meme use by political party accounts. So I think my sense is, at least in the UK, some of the younger staffers have been given a bit more creative control over the kind of output of their TikTok platforms. And like Labour had some quite successful kind of memes in the 2024. So some of their memes kind of cut through. My sense was that they had people who were kind of platform users generating the content rather than let's record a video of Keir Starmer speaking to camera type thing.
Do you remember the classic, was it the Rishi Sunak one where he's like in the back of a car, but it's obviously filmed by the guy who sat right next to him, and it's like uncomfortably close. And you can just tell when some content is being produced that is by somebody who has no idea what they're doing, because it is like this, Sunak is in your space and he's talking about what he's doing and he won't leave you alone. There's a skill that is being curated by these platforms that can just a language. I think a language is the right way of expressing it, of this kind of proficiency of this is how you engage with like you put like a thirst trap, the term for you go onto a new video, there's a very attractive individual in this video, and then they do a transition, and it's usually like a costume change or whatever, but it will just transition to like the senator from Kentucky who's then talking to you about a new piece of legislation.
That's why we opened the podcast to the video on me. Yeah.
People come in for the raw magnetism of Matt Wall on the couch, and then they stay for the rest.
No, that was, I remember that, what you're referring to. It was a brilliant piece of content. It was like a TikTok video, and you see a girl's butt and she's like dropping down. All of a sudden this I think it was the senator says, hey, don't remember to register to vote.
Yes, that is exactly the one. It's exactly the one.
Like that is good social media content.
Exactly. But it feeds back. We were talking about this in the last episode, where like you're kind of making that decision of whether to watch something or not in like the first second. And if the first thing that you're seeing is either a very attractive female or a US representative in a grey suit, like, I mean, man, it's pretty obvious which one you're going to stick around for. And then you just get played. You've just been aroused into politics, which I think should be our slogan for this podcast.
Which is, there's also this political strategy behind it of, which gender are you appealing to? So my sense is that this campaign team said, we need to get young males registered to vote. So they opened with that clip versus something else for females. So there is kind of that strategy going on behind the scenes as well.
But this is what it speaks to, about that, this kind of being a language or a skill that people know how to cultivate. I mean, sex sells, but at the same time, you are taking advantage of a current trend. So you have to be kind of in the know with what people are watching. You know that people are having to make this decision very quickly. You need something that's going to grab their attention. So I think that kind of pivots into something else that I wanted to ask through what you found through your research is effectively like the good side of all of these, all of this research, all of this, the developments of short form content, or the development of like online communities, for example, and these spaces that we typically describe in quite negative terms. We're kind of always talking about the dangers of these spaces for radicalization, the dangers of absolutely cooking people's attention spans for short form content. But, and this was again something from the end of your paper, that you say that these, what you call ideological homogenous spaces, could also provide a sense of community and a greater likelihood of participation in civic and political life, which could be interpreted as positive outcomes for democracy. So I guess that is the question: is can you talk a little bit about the positive uses of these spaces? What good can come from here? Something to counteract the general negative vibe that we usually have when we talk about social media.
Yeah, I mean, it, so democracy is an idea, right? It's something that sort of is enacted. And there's various understandings and values of what goes into a good democracy. Is it, informed, rational decision making, or is it participation?
Yeah.
And of course, you want both, right? But I mean, if you look, for example, at voter turnout in the US, it's at all-time highs. Political interest is at I mean, maybe not all time, but in recent history. So social media, if you think that you need a certain critical mass of the population to be tuned into politics and to be active in voting and community engagement, I mean, we're seeing high levels of that, partly as a result of social media. Now, is it the best quality of information that people are making decisions on? Probably not. But if you value participation as fundamental to democracy, then people getting involved with politics, even in ways you disagree with, is still a net positive if you have that idea of democracy.
Yeah. I think mobilization is really kind of the key word for how social media has like a potential functional role in democracy.
And I think, I mean, just to say it, maybe, and again, this is kind of specific, I suppose, to my generation. So previous to social media, politics in like Western Europe, or at least in Ireland where I lived, have become very like managerial and sort of atomized, if that makes sense. So as a sort of young person trying to become interested in politics, you had a lot of very just triangulated kind of policy offers coming at you. So it didn't seem to make that much of a difference. And it was all just a frame within which you were sort of, maybe you pick the party that you liked the most, but it wasn't a context where you could build, or where most people, I think, found that they were drawn into these kind of quite solidaristic, bonding kind of moments, right? The politics that we're in now, I think, does generate, not unlike, I know people talk about the civil rights movement in the States through that lens of, something that kind of drew you in, and in this kind of quite extreme context, you make connections with people that you'd never otherwise make. I think social media can connect you to people with similar views, and especially I think where not just the views of other people, but the the views and behavior of political leaders are becoming more extreme. It can be, there is valuing in being able to find like-minded people, and kind of sharing your attempts to kind of interact politically with where we are.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of homogenous sorting, echo chamber effect, the kind of inverse of that is like you can be very physically isolated, but able to connect with people and kind of follow very closely the thing that you're passionate about.
Yeah. And can I elaborate on that? Because I agree that there is an increased potential, like you have more media choice, you have lots of platforms, so you can self-select into more content you already agree with. And so, like, yes, there may be certain pockets of echo chambers online, but I have a real problem with this idea of filter bubbles or echo chambers when you kind of broaden it out to real life as well. Like, there's just not a world that most people live in where you can go through life and never hear a view that you disagree with. So like maybe you have your echo chamber on Twitter or X, but then like at some point you're talking to someone and they have a different view. Or research also shows that people who are really holding one political view actively seek out the other side so that they can be better affirmed in their argument. So it's not like people are not exposed to other content. they can definitely find more content that reinforces their views.
Mhm.
So the idea of echo chambers is a little bit more nuanced. And this is not a critique of what you just said at all,
No,
Matt,
no.
but just to broaden it out, because I think it's a misconception that like everyone's in an echo chamber and that's why everything is the way it is.
But I think you can find more easily people who feel the same way through the kind of the social part of social media.
Yeah, sure.
Then yeah, if you just and I mean, people used to self-sort a lot more generally, right? So like union membership, certain kinds of occupations, there was a sort of self-selection process before social media was ever invented, right? So people would sort into sort of social clubs that aligned with their work, that tended to align with, in that case, kind of a Labour or Social Democratic Party identity. But just the kind of collapsing of the physical element of that is a feature of the social media age.
Yeah, and to pivot back to the negative, because it's how the paper of yours that I've been quoting many times kind of ends, because you're looking at, of course, as you say, in this particular instance, this particular data set, this particular point in time, that there were imbalances in the way that the right and the left post. I guess the question is, like, if that was to continue, if that was to proliferate, if that was to get worse, do you then see this? I mean, what do you see as the problems coming from that, or the consequences coming from that, if these spaces are to become, as you say, more and more ideologically homogenous, even if there is still that caveat that people still seek out the other side?
Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit from the question because I think this is really important, which is like, so within these social media studies, people are studying different platforms, different times. There's like all these mixed results. One thing that is quite consistent is that when people post on social media about politics, it tends to be more extreme, both on the left and the right. And the effect that that has is if you just look at social media, you are going to get a distorted picture of what people think about politics. You're only going to see the extremes that are both because people are posting and also because algorithms can sort of prioritize that content. So I think like across different societies, we are heavily overestimating the amount of political extremism. And there's a lot of research that shows that when it comes to polarization, people are not actually that polarized on their political views, but they overestimate how polarized the other side is. So like, and Chris Bale has a book and he calls it the social media prism. And I think it's a great sort of metaphor because when we look at social media for politics, we're seeing it through this like refracted lens of extremism that just doesn't hold in reality. So people did go to social clubs and, talk with their fellow union members or whatever, they would find much more common ground than they would see on social media. So on the one hand, to get back to your question, there could be this like extreme bubbles of left and right, but it's like people don't mostly live that way in real life. And so there's this huge overestimation.
But I also think there's I think a lot of how we behave actually is driven by our perceptions of the beliefs of others rather than necessarily a kind of living through of our own beliefs. And so it to push back at your argument a bit, but not fundamentally, but there can be a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in these biased representations, right? If you're sort of just subconsciously absorbing the idea that people are like quite extreme and that it's kind of okay to be like that, I think it must have an effect on your actual behavior. Like if you look at some of the unite the kingdom march and stuff that we have here, I think more people are mobilized and sort of emboldened. And part of that must be seeing all this stuff online constantly. So I wonder, does it kind of loop to some extent to where the
misinterpretation is creating the reality?
Thinking the world is more extreme than it is kind of can make it more extreme than it is over time.
Yeah, 100%. And some work that my colleagues are looking into is like the media has just been reporting about polarization. You could just see the mentions of polarization just sharply increase over the years. And the question is that contributing
Yeah.
to people being more polarized,
Yeah.
right? And there's one more concept I want to bring in here because I think it's really relevant, and that's the third person effect. And the third person effect is the idea that something doesn't affect you, but it affects everyone else.
Right.
So, like currently, that's disinformation. People
Mhm.
report that my views won't change from disinformation, but everyone else's will.
Mm.
And we saw this already with television. So when television came out, people were saying, this is terrible. No one's ever going to leave their couch. Like society is going to stop, but I'm not going to be affected. And so when you scale that up, it's like the Spider-Man meme of everyone pointing at the other person. And so I think that dynamic is going on as well. Is like everyone thinks everyone else is affected, but they don't think their self is affected. Um, and what does that do to behavior is a really interesting question.
Yeah,
But
I mean, what it does to a
yeah,
researcher as well is kind of messes you up, right? This
yeah,
reflexivity, after, like, it's very difficult to. I always find it's kind of the easiest thing is just to pretend like you're neutral, but once you start to get into that way of seeing the world and being, having the humility to think that it can, obviously things can happen to you that you're
Mm.
ascribing to other people. It doesn't actually help that much, is what I'm trying to say.
no,
You just
Mm.
end up a little bit more less inclined to make kind of bold assertions, I suppose.
Yeah. So as a final question, we'll end on a happy note.
It's been an emotional roller coaster.
It has. We've been sat in the studio for 7 days. It's been crazy. Um, I remember shortly after the U.S. presidential election that we recently had, our first post-election episode, I asked Matt if he could end on a message of hope, and his response was to kind of break down into hysterical laughter, which I think was pretty accurate at the time. So I guess that's my ask for you now. Is I know that you mentioned about how polarization may not be as bad as we think, but it is still part of a reality for a lot of people that we're kind of in a very tense atmosphere at the moment. Any mentions of Trump losing the election, obviously there's a bit of an elevation of kind of the more extremist views, as you say. The threats of like civil war that come out as a result of that, and we had our Unite the Kingdom rally here very recently, which had like over 100,000 people in the streets of London. There were, and it got violent, right? And it's this is being led by Tommy Robinson, who's a notorious figure of the political right in Britain. This man has criminal allegations, felonies, whatever. So for many people, this is all they're seeing, right? This is their worldview, is being projected through the lens of protest, of unrest, of tension, of like distrust as well, but also on a visual level. Like if you were to watch that Unite the Kingdom rally, chances are you're seeing a lot of people that look like us three, right? A lot of white guys, okay? And it's, as Matt said, potentially contributing to their reality. So I guess like I'm not asking you to fix anything, but like through your research, through what you found, through your day-to-day interactions with people online or in person, like do you have a nice positive message that people can take into the week that maybe things aren't as bad as they look?
yes, I can. It doesn't have to do with my research per se, but um, thinking about like television and these kind of social clubs of earlier years. I mean, um, when you look kind of back at history, a lot of what's happening isn't really new,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right? So, of course, media changes the dynamics a bit, but I think if you sort of zoom out from like the politics of today, like we're living in probably the best time of human civilization, right? To go back to this evolutionary picture. I mean, of course, um, like if you look sort of worldwide, like a lot of hunger and poverty has made a lot of progress, even just with media, right? Almost everyone can have some access to a smartphone, be
Mm-hmm.
plugged into like worldwide communication and all the knowledge that offers and all the nasty stuff that offers as well. So I've heard social media described as a type of mirror, like a sort of
Mm.
hyper reality where, like, yes, there's a lot of racism online, but there's a lot of racism in real life as well. We just haven't been exposed to it
Mm-hmm.
at scale. So that's just to say that, like, in the big picture, as society has developed, I think we're living in really good times.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look into our phones, we're just seeing things that were already there, just magnified, and it's distasteful. and it makes us feel more negative than things actually are.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
I think
lovely.
I'm going to go for a walk now, and the exit to the Plato's cave is just beside there. So I'll let you guys know what I see topside.
I'll stay here for another week. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. 2 episodes as well. You are now our most featured guest on
Wonderful.
the
It's
podcast.
been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. for
Appreciate
coming.
it, man. Look forward to catching up again.
If people are looking for you, where can they find you?
They can just check out my website, I guess. All links are there, michaelbossetta.com.
Brilliant. Awesome. Everybody, thank you for watching. Michael, thank you for your time. Geraint, thank you for your production, and we'll see you next week.